I'm Bo Humphreys, and I'm a personal finance coach. Normally, I blog about personal finance at investwisely.ca or have a podcast called The Personal Finance Show, and that's obviously about personal finance too. But today, I'm going to tell a little bit of my story, which is about addiction and mental health, because I think it's really important to talk about this stuff. People don't talk about it enough, and it kind of made me into the person that I am today, which feels like a completely different person, to be honest. So I'm going to tell you a little story. There are probably 4 major incidents in my gambling addiction period. So I'm going to talk about the worst one today, which is when I was 25, and I had a pretty bad relapse. So I was working at a job I didn't really like so much. Well, it was okay, but I wasn't really enjoying it. I didn't see a lot of future there. I knew I needed to make a change. So, what I thought was I'm going to take a little trip. It was my 25th birthday. I found this thing called a repositioning cruise, and this was like a one-night, like 2-day cruise for like $100. On my birthday, I'm going to cruise underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's going to be awesome. And it was awesome cruising under the Golden Gate Bridge, but what I didn't realize was this was probably the worst idea for me at the time, because it turns out, as I found out later, I have attention deficit disorder, and ADD, it made me afraid of everything. And one of the things that I was afraid of mostly was new things and being in uncomfortable situations, because I didn't know how to deal with them. There's really something about focus and being able to handle new things and being able to really pay attention to them that it was really a struggle for me. So going on a trip at this time was not a good idea, especially since I'd been kind of okay with the gambling for a little bit. So I get on this cruise, and it turns out there's a casino on board, and I'm all by myself, and I'm feeling lonely and uncomfortable, and so I turned to the thing that made me comfortable, and so I went and visited the casino, and just one thing led to another, and I spent a little bit of money. So, but at this point, I have the bug again, and I cruise under the Golden Gate Bridge, but I feel sort of guilty about my gambling at the casino. Like, do I have to tell people? I spend money that I don't have. It's always money that I don't have at this point. What I did was the whole rest of my San Francisco trip, I was either thinking about gambling or actually looking for a casino. I actually spent 2 hours walking around San Francisco trying to find a casino. I don't know. I don't think at this point I had internet or a way to figure it out. So I was like, maybe there's one. Anyhow, it was pretty bad. All I could think about was getting home and gambling. And I didn't know how. I just knew I needed to get home and gamble. So I get home on the plane, and the first thing that I do is just go buy a bunch of lottery tickets. And I wasn't really one to buy. I bought lottery tickets when I was younger, but that wasn't really like gambling to me. So, but I just buy a couple $100 worth of lottery tickets, and it just starts to get worse and worse from there. Over a couple of weeks, maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks from when I get back, I'm just really sort of taking an extreme gambling approach, and like maybe thinking that I'm just going all out, or I'm not feeling good. I can't really tell you exactly what caused it. I mean, maybe I had this extreme fear of just not being able to be comfortable somewhere other than where I currently was in my job, and when I didn't want to go back to the job, and I was just miserable, and the way to cope was doing this gambling thing that I always did to cope with life. And funny enough, I had applied to a job a couple of months before, and I figured it was long gone, but I heard back from this job, and it was a job at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, a place I ended up working for 6 years after that in the live entertainment department. And there was a strike, and so they weren't really, there was a hiring freeze, so they kind of were delayed in hiring. So they came to me a couple of months later, and so I went and I started the interview process, and the interview process made everything worse because this is like super high stress, and I couldn't handle it. I just, at this point in my life, I just couldn't handle it without gambling heavily. And since I was already into the gambling, it just made it worse. Maybe if I hadn't started on the cruise casino, it wouldn't be so bad. But I started, and so now I'm just like basically blowing through all the money that I have, maxing out the credit cards, no money in the bank. And I'm going through these 3 interviews for this job, and I have to prepare all these presentations, and I go through these interviews, and it's going well. During the day, I'm at my current job at work, and everything is going well during the day, and then I get home at night, and I just basically gamble as much as I can in order to cope. I don't even think I was washing dishes at this point, probably not even cooking food, because I'd take out, I would just go to McDonald's, just anything that was easy, anything that wasn't effort, because I only had enough energy to put in I knew that I needed to get this job because the alternative was not good for me. This kind of gave me an option for the future, maybe even a way out of the situation that I was in, where I might have more money that I could use to pay down debts. So it was during this really kind of the worst relapse I've ever had. One night I hit the jackpot, and it was $20,000. And that would have been enough to cover everything that I just spent since I came back from San Francisco, and also some of my existing debt, gambling debt. And so the first thing I was like, oh, this is great. That was the first feeling that I had, was this is great. Finally I can start to get out of this. And immediately after that feeling, I had a feeling that I wasn't ever going to get to keep this money, and that I wouldn't even be able to hold on to it for another day. That this jackpot would just make me want to gamble more. And the thing about finding this out about yourself is a really kind of a dreadful thing, to know that you, even if you win enough money to pay back what you lost, it's never going to stick. And it didn't even stick for another day. And at the same time that I realized that I was going to hold on to it, I realized that I was never going to be able to get out of my gambling by gambling. There's no solution to gambling that involves gambling, because gambling would just lead to more gambling, and that always leads to more losses. The only way to get out of the gambling would be to stop and really try to figure out what was wrong with me that was causing me to do this. So it was kind of a good thing, but I didn't know it at the time. It was really just probably the worst time of my life, because now all my credit cards are maxed out, and I probably had about 7, maybe 5 to 7 at that time, credit cards, because I would just, whatever way I could get gambling funds. And I had no money in my bank account, so I couldn't even pay my rent. So I had to reach out to a good friend of mine, and he thought I stopped gambling a long time ago. It was a very private thing for me. And so he was furious that I was gambling again. But he did agree to lend me the money for rent, and I told him that he could have full access to my bank accounts, my credit cards, to have a look at them whenever he wanted over the next little bit. And that's always been a bit of a temporary measure. Holding on to someone's credit cards or having someone look at your stuff, it's only temporary. The real fix for me was when I figured out what was wrong with me and got that treated. And then not instantly, but the gambling, the need to do something extreme like gambling to cope, that went away. But the end of this story is I'm probably about $40,000 in debt, and I'm starting a new job, which is, I think maybe it was paying me $40,000 a year, So it's not ideal, but it's better than the situation I was in before, but not really, because I'm probably another $15,000 or $20,000 in debt from when I was before. Overall the story has a happy ending, but it didn't happen right away. And I really want to tell people about this because, addiction is hard. Mental health is also hard. And the only way that I was able to get through this was by taking the time that I needed to explore what was wrong with me and then taking the time to treat it. And I was only able to find out about the ADD after I went through a whole bunch of different therapy options to figure it out. And even then it wasn't instant. I started taking the medication and it did change my life, but I still had these residual gambling behaviors. I want people to know that this is out there. And then if you're going through something like this, not exactly like this, but maybe you just had a spending problem, there's a way out. You can get out of it. It might not be right away, but just as long as you know that there is a way out, then you can take the steps. But usually there's no way out of something by doing the same thing that you were doing, right? They say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I just kept gambling, thinking that somehow it was going to fix itself, or this time was the time. And I had to change my life completely to get out of this. You don't go work in a cigarette factory if you're trying to quit smoking. I'm a big Cheers fan, but I think Sam Malone gave a really bad example by working in a bar being an alcoholic. You don't really do that if you're trying to change yourself, because you're always stuck in there. I got a job, about 10, 15 years ago at a casino in my town. I'm a trained roulette dealer. I'm a croupier because I thought it would be a good idea. It would be a good idea to not be able to gamble in the casino that I worked in, which is true. But I was just exposing myself to this world that I really, really needed to get out of. And so I'll tell my other stories another time, but I think this is a good one to start with because, your lowest point is there's only, they say you can only go up from there. And it's, I can talk about it now. It's still hard to talk about it. I can talk about it now, but it was really terrible. And I never thought about suicide. And funny enough, I never thought about even going to get a payday loan, which is what a lot of people would have done instead of going to their friend. I think part of me wanted some accountability, some help, and sometimes the only way I could get help was by causing some kind of disaster for myself. So that's my story for today anyway, and it's not the most uplifting one, but it's very important for people to know. And I'm here at FinCon, it's a personal finance conference, because today I help people, and I help them by just trying to give them some basic advice about what to do with their money, but I also want to help people by telling my story. And if you have a story, you should tell it too, because you never know who's going to be listening, and then they say, I have that too, and then they go get medicated, or I have something similar, and then they talk to you about it, and maybe they never even thought about it before, but it's something that they can work on and fix, but they never thought that they could, or no one ever showed them the acceptance. And this is important. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.